Due to medical reasons, my 47-year-old son, 19 years old, will never be able to drive or ride a bike because of poor balance and bad depth perception, and he is really affected by this, especially when it comes to dating. I haven't been able to give him any specific advice because he has inherited this condition from my wife's side. I hope you can help me. Story 1. If he can't drive, then he's just going to have to find someone who doesn't care. If it's a deal breaker, it's a deal breaker. There isn't a magical solution that's going to change that. The only way to minimize it is for him to move to somewhere it's more common not to drive, such as a big city. Story 2. Location is everything. Where I currently live, it would be a total deal breaker. In the countryside of Kent, there is no public transportation, and I'm not rich enough to use the only local taxi company that actually operates here. Where I grew up in Nottingham, it would be easy. We had buses that ran until 3 a.m. on the weekends. London is also very similar. Lots of people don't drive there. Story 3. Live in Europe. I'm currently nearly 40 and car-free, and it's great. Edit. I see you live in Europe. I guess moving to a city would be my solution, but it isn't that practical, I guess. Story 4. I was carless until 26. In my experience, not having a car made them lose interest 100% of the time. Mileage may vary, I guess. Your son isn't me, so please take it with a grain of salt. I don't know for certain if it was the actual reason and not just a factor for all of these. Story 5. Does he have a job, prospects? What does he have to offer the other person he is trying to date if the simple fact of not having a driver's license prevents him from dating? Story 6. I don't drive. I had 10 lessons during university, but my instructor was terrible. He spent the whole 10 hours complaining about his divorce. I know he was the problem, but it discouraged me from trying again at the time. I'm 28 now and have dated a lot. Countless Tinder hookups, several long-term relationships. Approaching 2 years in one now. Definitely agree with most comments here. On a practical level, it really doesn't matter much when living in big cities or really anywhere with adequate public transport. There is an obvious other level to it, though, women who see it as a downside. Ultimately, the best way to tackle this is to find something that makes you stand out more than the average man who can drive. In my case, I've traveled to 51 countries. I spend more time traveling the world than I do in my own country these days simply because I went and got a master's degree and landed a job for a very decent company that allows remote working from anywhere. No one even asks me why I don't drive anymore because it's so obvious I just don't have the time nor need for it. It doesn't have to be travel, though. Just anything that sets you apart. Remember, most men can drive. It's hardly an accomplishment. Find something that is. Story 7. I don't know what I can say in terms of advice, but I am a guy who no longer drives because of medical reasons. I don't do a lot of dating, but when I do, I have found women to be understanding when I explain I can't drive for medical reasons. Your son can still come up with fun activities to do for a date, he can still pay for his date, and so on. If a woman likes your son and wants to date him, hopefully she will be willing to drive, considering the reason is out of his control. There's also the idea of doing double dates and the other friend can drive. Story 8. I'm 28 years old and capable of driving but choose not to. It was a problem while I was living in a rural area, but now I live in Warsaw, which has a great public transport system, and honestly, I don't even notice the lack of a driving license. On the topic of dating, I put the information about it in my Tinder bio and have no problems finding dates. Your son will be fine. Story 9. It will be harder for him. It's easier if you live in a city with good transport. The problem is that a lot of women will look for guys with a car because lots of guys have cars nowadays, and they are willing to pick them up and drive them around. Does he have other things going for him? Being independent would help, I think. Story 10. Live in an urban center where a driver's license is less important. Get comfortable using Ubers or taxis. It may seem expensive, but that's a much more stylish ride than a bus. And that's what you need for dating. If you break down the cost of a car over time, including insurance, maintenance, and gas, routine Uber or even taxi rides probably cost less than a car anyway. Story 11. He will find while young that some girls prefer a guy with a car or find a guy without a car problem. But if he is looking for something long-term, a genuine partner won't have a problem with this. However, Reading your comments about being in a rural area of Europe, it may appear more common and less of a concern if he lived in a metropolitan area. Maybe he could use Uber to get around and not make a big deal about it. Story 12. I know several couples where the woman has a license and the guy doesn't. It will be easier if he lives somewhere where it's common to use public transportation, like London or New York City, and if he makes enough money to use taxis rather than the bus. If he's going to college, he should go to a place where living on campus or near campus is common and not a lot of students have cars. In general, I feel buses are looked down upon as opposed to trains, subways, and obviously taxis. And yes, there will always be a certain number of women who will turn him down for not driving or having a car. Well, there are probably a bunch of other reasons he will be turned down as well. I mean, he has a disability that's hereditary. That's unfortunately probably going to be an issue. But we play the hand we're dealt. And while many will reject him, I'm sure he'll find plenty who won't. Story 13. Go live in a city where you do not need a car, and it will not be a problem. Step 2 is that he has got to start lifting weights and eating his protein. That is the age where your body starts to fill out and become less boyish. At that age, it is way easier to build muscle, and it gets harder as you get older. Getting muscles and being into competitive sports will give him the confidence to talk to girls. Step 3 is to go to parties where young people drink alcohol. Alcohol is the social lubricant that builds friendships. Friendships that lead to meeting more girls whom he can eventually date. Step 4 is to get some self-earned money to pay for said dates. Step 5 is to get your own place where he can get laid. Story 14. I'm absolutely able to buy a car and drive it, but I won't for as long as I can get away with it. When asked about it, I just say it's a money sink. You can't really argue with that. They either want someone with a car or they're fine with someone without. Story 15. I am in a relationship where it's a 3-hour train journey away, and neither of us drive. Neither of us care to drive. The key, as with any dating, is to find someone who loves you for who you are. Story 16. How okay are you with wearing a butler uniform, faking a British accent, and addressing your son as master, son's name, and driving him around while wearing a driving hat and glove set? Story 17. I know plenty of guys that do not drive. It is not necessary when you live in a walkable, bikeable city with a safe and effective subway network, as millions of Americans do. In fact, if someone drives, it can imply they live in a less accessible or desirable neighborhood. That said, services like Uber and Lyft pick up the slack. If that is not a possibility, you should move. If you live in a place that is hostile towards your lifestyle, it is not a good idea to stick around. Everything is harder, including work, dating, and daily tasks like groceries or banking. Story 18. Man, I've never had a car of my own, and I've had dozens of dates. All it needs is to be in a big city, and even that's not necessarily true if you're from a touristic village where the number of different people is vast and unending. Story 19. My now husband doesn't have a car or full license, so I always drive. One day he will get his full license and learn to drive. He just always took the bus to see me, or I would drive to see him. We live in an area that's decently accessible by bus. When I first started dating him, I preferred a man who drives, mostly because I don't enjoy driving. But it wasn't a deal breaker. Considering we live in a bus-accessible area, him not having a car really does save him a lot of money, so that's nice. Story 20. Maybe he needs to prioritize living on campus if and when he goes to college. If he were then to only move to cities with top-tier public transit, such as rail systems, I think it would be far less of an issue. That does mean he needs to choose his major accordingly. In some big cities, it's not really that big of a deal. Story 21. I would recommend he moves to a city with good public transportation. A place like New York City where a car is more of a very expensive hassle rather than a necessity. Alternatively, he could use Uber everywhere. He's going to need to make some good money to keep that up, though. Story 22. I'm not really the dominant type to begin with, so I'm more than happy to just be the passenger princess, especially because I would be a bad driver anyway due to my autism. Story 23. Date someone who drives? Most dates include some kind of meal or drinks, so the car's out of the question. Uber or taxis. On the plus side, He's in a generation where self-driving is becoming a big thing. Allowances for disabilities will surely follow. Story 24. My husband doesn't have a driver's license, and we don't own a car. In cities, public transport gives you freedom. Owning a car would actually restrict me, especially financially. Story 25. It is totally possible to date without driving or having a license. The right person won't care if he isn't able to drive. I don't drive, and I'm 32 with a 3-year-old. We get by just fine. Story 26. UK-based, 6 miles from the local town, 3 miles from a large village. I haven't driven for 9 years due to medical reasons. I never say I can't drive. I generally walk everywhere. This is a good question and something I've wondered about. I did see one commenter saying women prefer to drive. This is a fair point. It's not that cool to say, yeah, I'm chauffeur-driven everywhere by the bus and a bus pass. I guess it's up to the girl. In my opinion, I don't think it's cool. However, if the girl likes him, then I guess it comes with the package. People are quite impressed with me that I walk everywhere. I think people are lazy, which is why they are impressed. Story 27. So check this out. Pops, we need you to find a clean, classic car, tint it out and get yourself a suit. Son just tells the lady he's going to send his driver for her. In all seriousness, no one is perfect. He will find someone who accepts him. Story 28. I mean, he has to move to a city. I don't own a car and haven't for 15 years now, and I never miss it. I am European, though. American dating culture seems to revolve a lot around cars. Story 29. I do have a driver's license, but I've never owned a car, and it's never been a problem. In fact, I learned to drive in a rural area and was afraid of driving in the city. My first girlfriend actually helped me hire a car and do some driving practice in the city. Story 30. A good friend of mine never had a license, he just doesn't want to. Not because he can't, and he's never had a problem. Sydney has decent public transport and uses Uber for the rest. His current girlfriend is the first to also have a license, so he's a bit of a passenger princess, but before that, they never really cared. The current one doesn't either. Story 31. I would move to a pedestrian-friendly city. I hope that does not sound harsh. That is what I did when I was his age and had no car, and I had no problem doing anything I wanted to do, including dating. It made my life easier in almost every other way as well. Story 32. My stepson just got his license last year at age 30. His number of partners is probably approaching 100, if not past it. None of his relationships last, though. He is an alcoholic and has bipolar disorder with high anxiety. Oh, and he lives with his grandmother. Story 33. There is a big difference between not having a license and not being able to drive, period. Not having a license never stopped me from driving. But if he can't drive at all, then I suggest maybe using an Uber or a Lyft, or dating a girl who has a car and can drive. Story 34. Cars are convenient for the city but not a necessity. Plan ahead and use Uber or public transport. It's more embarrassing trying to park for 30 minutes with a date than hopping out of an Uber right in front of a restaurant. Story 35. I live in Portland, Maine, and I do not have a driver's license. My bicycle has been in a closet for 2 years. If he lives somewhere walkable, he won't need to drive, and most people won't find it odd. Story 36. If you live in America, you are affected, but in some other parts of the world, you can have a regular life without a car. Of course, having a car increases your chances to succeed, but you should be fine. Story 37. Encourage him to use public transport. Drop your son. The conversation will come up if he is planning to have a relationship. It's better if she knows about it. I'm assuming that it might run in the family since your wife also can't drive. Story 38. I am 34 and have never had a car. It was never even a question. We live in Switzerland. Public transport and trains in particular are excellent, even outside cities. In other European countries, your experience may vary, but at least in cities, public transport tends to be very good as well. The train to the next large station runs every couple of minutes. We have a tram to the airport basically in front of our porch every 15 minutes, with multiple bus stops in every direction. Everything runs from 5 a.m. until after midnight on weekdays and longer on weekends. Shopping is everywhere within walking distance. My doctor, basically a small hospital, is within walking distance. I can walk to the gym through a nearby park. It takes 2 minutes. My wife hasn't driven in a dozen years. I have, in fact, never seen her drive at all. Laughing my ass off. The question isn't how do you date? The question is how do you fare once you have a family and kids? That's when you probably need a car because you have so much to take with you when you go somewhere. Story 39. I read this as he inherited the condition from your side wife. I went through quite a few years of my adulthood not having a car. Somehow I managed to get around well enough. Taxis are prevalent now, but I don't know what the prices are like, though. If he's talking to the right girl, it won't matter if he's using a taxi or whatever to her. Story 40. Explain to him that there are plenty of women who don't care if a guy can drive or not. If they do, then this will be a useful technique for weeding out the codependent partners from those seeking genuine connection. Plus, if it's due to health issues, then he has a valid reason. Story 41. I have taken the bus everywhere. When I started dating my partner, I biked and met them that way. Or they picked me up, or I used an Uber. Sometimes I even walked. Story 42. Choose to make a bigger city with an actual public transportation system. If you're in the United States outside of New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and places like them, he's in trouble. Unfortunately, a majority of medium-sized U.S. cities are built around driving. There are things like Amtrak, our only national train company as far as I know, that I use to go to different cities or even states. Bikes, Uber, Lyft, taxis, buses, trains, electric scooters, electric bikes, and walking are pretty much the only alternatives. Other than that, it's just a matter of finding someone who doesn't mind. I've had plenty of different dates who have no issues giving me a ride, mostly because I met them halfway by going to their city, and it's simpler than having to worry about 2 cars. Just have manners, offer to pay for gas, and things like that. Unfortunately, some will have a problem with it, mostly young, immature people who are unaware of nuances like medical conditions and so on. You're better off without these people in your life. Overall, if he's a good guy and is showing them a good time, most of them won't care.